Brownies, brownies, brownies. They are my favorites. Right here I have two different specimens of brownies. I have A and B. It's kind of hard to see. They look pretty much the same. Not a whole lot of difference with them. They are my favorite dessert, and I don't know many people who don't like brownies. They're squares of heaven in my opinion. Although brownies aren't on a dieter's list of go-to snacks, there is a healthier way of enjoying brownies without sacrificing flavor or texture. I don't like processed food, and I try to avoid it when I can because it's so unhealthy for us. But to be honest, when it came to brownies, I could never find a brownie recipe that I liked that was homemade. So I always stuck with the queen, Betty Crocker. They're amazing too. But when I started doing some extensive research and sacrificial taste testing on my part, guilty, I have found that although Betty Crocker may be the queen, there are some ingredients on her quite extensive list of ingredients that are listed that gave me cause to concern. I did a little bit of research and have found some ingredients that I really think are unhealthy and can be dangerous if they're eaten a whole lot. One of them is hydrogenated oil. Hydrogenated oil is in a lot of boxed and processed food, so it's really something you want to keep an eye out for. I never knew this before, but hydrogenated oil is a version of trans fat. It has a lot of trans fats, and I didn't know that they're kind of like poisons, like arsenic and cyanide. They interfere with the metabolic process of life in our body by taking place of natural substances that perform a critical function for us. I heard it described as a kind of a good cop, bad cop situation. You know, a good cop or a security guard protects the body, letting natural things pass through and stopping unnatural things that shouldn't pass through the body. But when it comes to trans fats and hydrogenated oils, they're the bad cop. They don't, almost like they don't pay attention to the good and the bad that are going through the body. So that's one ingredient that Betty Crocker box brownies do have, is hydrogenated oil. Another ingredient that Betty Crocker has listed on this box, you can't see it, but I have several ingredients that I wasn't sure about that I looked up. One of them is sodium alginate. It's made from a brown algae and is used as an additive in foods like ice cream, soy sauce to enhance the flavor, but it's also used as a thickening agent for gravies and other soupy and not quite thinner, but things like gravy and sauces. It's used in that. It's almost like a thickener, like in tapioca pudding and gravies. You can find it in almost any processed food. It should be listed on the nutrition fact label. People who have to watch out for sodium really should be careful when they're picking foods off the shelf at food markets to check for this, because it has some unwanted side effects like increased blood pressure, can even cause poor bone health, and in some cases it can be linked to congestive heart failure. Because sodium, if you don't already know this, sodium makes you retain water, and it means that excess fluid is present when more sodium is intaked. And in turn, it makes your heart have to work harder to circulate the added fluid. That's what leads to increased blood pressure and can link to congestive heart failure. Now, when I did my research on a brownie recipe, I came and found a very good brownie recipe. And it only has about 5 ingredients in it. which I thought was really interesting because you have Betty Crocker's brownies, which have well over 20 ingredients. See? Look at that. Look at all those ingredients. You don't only have the ingredients like sugar and salt, but you have enriched flour, which has iron and thiamine in it, monotrites, riboflavin, folic acid, and then you also have the chocolate fudge sauce that goes into it, the semi-sweet chocolate chips that go into it, the cocoa processed with alkali corn syrup. All of these have its own set of ingredients that goes into it. But when I did my research of the best brownie ever, which I truly believe that it is, it only has 6 ingredients. It has unsalted butter, it has sugar, it has cocoa powder, it has a little bit of salt, vanilla, 2 eggs, and all-purpose flour, and then you can put walnuts or pecans if you like. That's all that's in this brownie recipe. It's made by a lady who wrote a book called Semi-Sweet. Her name is Alice Medricks, and her brownies are truly amazing. And this is coming from somebody who never liked box brownies before in her life. Not box brownies, but homemade brownies. But I'm telling you, this recipe is foolproof, and I am very much a pro of homemade brownies now because I have learned that not only can they taste the same, they can taste better. This is a homemade brownie, a brownie that I would never say is better than a boxed brownie, but it truly is. It's not quite as fluffy. If you notice, this brownie is more cake-like and spongy, whereas the homemade brownie is a bit denser, but it's very moist. Now, when I did a taste test of these side by side, they were both really good. I love brownies, so it really doesn't matter what kind it is, but I did notice that in this brownie, which is the homemade brownie, almost fell off the plate, this brownie, the taste of chocolate in it seemed so much more pure. It almost tasted like the pure chocolate you would get in a Swedish chocolatier's restaurant or store. It's very pure, it's very decadent, it's very rich, and just so you know, it tastes really good with a dollop of ice cream on top. Betty Crocker brownies are still delicious. I love them very much. But after learning about the process and the different chemicals that went into it, I can definitely now say that I am not a pro for Betty Crocker. It's not Betty Crocker's fault that all this stuff goes into her brownies. She's just the name. It's the company. And all, because when you make your own brownies, you get to see what you put into it. You get to measure what goes into it. You get to choose whether you use cocoa powder that's a little bit less fresh than all-natural 100% cocoa powder. That's the most pure form you can get. It makes a big difference in your brownies. It makes a big difference in your body as well. I really, really think that it's important to watch what's on these labels. As I've gotten older, I've understood that these labels mean a whole lot to what our body's functions do. I'm not saying that I never go to McDonald's and have a burger, or I never go and get something off the shelf because it might make dinner a little bit easier, but I can tell you that I grew up in a home where, you know, most of the food was made homemade. My bread was fresh.